Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today's question is, can I analyze the disappearance of Brain Shaffer? Just a reminder, I'm not diagnosing anybody in this video, only speculating about what could be happening in a situation like this. If you enjoyed this video, please like it, subscribe to my channel, and consider supporting me on Patreon. I'll put the link to Patreon in the description for this video. So first, a look at the background of Brain Shaffer. I'll move to the timeline of the disappearance, then offer my analysis. Brain Shaffer was born in Pickerington, Ohio on February 25, 1979. His father's name was Randy. He was an electrician, and his mother's name was Renee. She was a nurse. Brain graduated from high school in 1997. Apparently, he was very good at tennis, so good that some people believed he could have been a professional tennis player. In 2003, he graduated with an undergraduate degree in microbiology from Ohio State University, also known as OSU. In 2004, he attended the OSU College of Medicine. Brain's mother, Renee, died of cancer in March of 2006. Brain struggled to cope with her death. At some point, Brain became romantically involved with a woman named Alexis Wagner. She was a fellow medical student. Alexis, her family, and her friends all believed that Brain was going to propose to her at some point in 2006. They believed the proposal was going to occur on a trip to Miami that the couple had scheduled over spring break. So at this point in his life, Brain has had some hardship, but overall, things are looking up for him. He plans on getting married. He plans on graduating from medical school. There's no indication that he has any thoughts about hurting himself or anything like that. This takes us to Friday, March 31, 2006. Brain is 27 years old at this point. Brain's classes are out in advance of spring break, which is coming up the next week. Brain and his father go out for dinner early in the evening. They had steak. Brain's father thought that Brain looked exhausted. Brain had been studying hard for exams that were coming up. Brain had plans to go out with a friend of his named William Florence, who went by the name Clint, but Brain's father didn't think it was a good idea. His father didn't voice his concern to Brain. He just thought to himself. Brain and Clint would meet at 9 p.m. at a bar in Columbus called the Ugly Tuna Saloon. Brain called Alexis at about 10 p.m. She was in Toledo visiting her family because she and Brain were going to leave to Miami for spring break that Monday. Nothing was out of the ordinary on their call. Brain and Clint went to multiple bars, engaging in an activity referred to as bar hopping. Each time they stopped, they took another shot of hard liquor. Not long after midnight, Brain and Clint met up with a woman named Meredith Reed. She was friends with Clint. Meredith drove the two men back to where their drinking adventure that night had started, the Ugly Tuna Saloon. Brain and Clint were going there to have their last drink. So these three people are together in the bar, and at some point, Brain became separated from Clint and Meredith. They looked for him. They couldn't find him. They tried calling him on his phone, but there was no answer. When the bar closed at 2 a.m., now we are on April 1, they waited outside, figuring they would see him in the crowd of people who were exiting. He was not there, so they made the assumption that he had made his way back to his apartment, which was nearby. Calls were attempted later by Brain's girlfriend and father, but Brain did not answer his phone. There are various reports about when exactly Brain was reported missing. A friend of the family said it was Sunday night. Other reports say it was Monday when Brain missed his scheduled flight to Miami. The obvious starting point to initiate an investigation was the Ugly Tuna Saloon. The bar was located in an area called South Campus Gateway. It was fitted with several cameras because that was an area that had a lot of crime. When reviewing the images captured by the cameras, the police noticed that at 1:15 a.m. on April 1, Brain, Meredith, and Clint rode an escalator to the bar's main entrance. So that's when they arrived. At 1:55 a.m., Brain was captured just outside the entrance of the bar, talking to two college-age women. He then exited that area covered by the camera. It is believed he re-entered the bar because there was really no other place he could have gone after leaving the view of the camera. The cameras did not record him leaving at 2 o'clock when the bar closed or at any time. It would appear that he entered the bar and never left. In addition to the main doors, The bar had a service door. It's possible that Brian exited using that door. The area around that door was under construction. The police thought it would be difficult to navigate for someone who was intoxicated. It's also possible that the two cameras could have missed him. One was operated manually, and the other one panned back and forth. So there would have been opportunities where Brian could have slipped past both cameras undetected. The police figured that even if the camera somehow missed Brian, cameras from other businesses surely would have picked him up. To their surprise, Brian did not appear in any other video surveillance recordings. The police started talking to people in the area, looking in the sewer, searching trash containers like dumpsters, looking for any clues as to where Brian was. They didn't find anything. They searched his apartment and his car, which was parked outside his apartment. Everything there looked normal. The police said that Brian and Clint had been in an altercation in the bar. They asked Clint to take a polygraph, but he contacted an attorney and offered no more information. The police were unable to find any meaningful evidence to explain Brian's disappearance or to locate him. Brian seemingly disappeared without a trace. Every night before bed, Brian's girlfriend called his cell phone. It would go to voicemail. But one night in September, it rang 3 times. His phone pinged a tower 14 miles northwest of Columbus. According to the service provider, it was some type of glitch, but there's no certainty around that issue. About 2.5 years after Brian's disappearance, his father Randy was working in the yard outside his home when the wind broke a branch off of a nearby tree. The branch struck and killed Randy. He was discovered the next day. An online obituary was posted for Randy. Someone put a comment on it that read, "Dad, I love you, love Brian." In parentheses, there was the words U.S. Virgin Islands. The police believe it was a hoax because it was tracked to a public computer in Ohio. Not long after Randy's death, an attorney representing Clint Florence wrote to a private investigator who had been volunteering to help find Brian. The attorney suggested that he had discovered the police believed Brian was alive. The attorney implied that Brian was the one causing everybody pain by not coming forward. Clint didn't have anything to hide. He already told the police everything he knew. There was no sense in repeating all that information. At the time making this video, Brian Shaffer has not been found. So now moving to my analysis. So what happened in this case? All mysterious disappearances have the same problem. All the theories that could explain what happened are remote, but one theory must be true, even if that possibility is extremely unlikely. Let's take a look at a few of the theories in this case. Number 1, a group known as the Smiley Face Killers targeted Brian, killed him, and left his body in a river. This group allegedly targets men of privilege and paints a smiley face somewhere near the crime, but no evidence has ever connected this theory to Brian's disappearance. Number 2, Brian somehow made his way out of the bar undetected, perhaps by changing his clothes or leaving through the service door, and he just happened to evade all the other cameras. After this, he ran into a person or persons who kidnapped and killed him. They managed to hide the body well, or they took it far from Columbus, where no one would be looking. Another version of the theory would be that Brian is still alive, like they kidnapped him and he's out there somewhere. It could also be that the assailants met Brian in the bar, and they're the ones who managed to get him out of there without being detected, like they had a change of clothes with them, or they helped him use that service door, helped him navigate that construction area. Maybe they saw Brian as an easy target because he was intoxicated. There are a few problems with this theory. Unless the assailants helped him to get out of the bar, this would involve 2 independent, low-probability events: Brian leaving the bar undetected and being the victim of a serious crime. I suppose one possibility is that one event was related to the other. That is, they were dependent probabilities. Maybe Brian left the bar undetected in order to meet people who were dangerous, like perhaps people involved in the illegal distribution of substances. Moving to theory number 3, the reason that Brian wasn't captured on the video surveillance is because he did not leave with everyone else. He was still in the bar when it closed. Somehow he died on the premises. Workers at the bar were frightened, so they took his body out of the service door and dumped it somewhere. They could have also just waited until the cameras were turned off and exited out of the main door. The problem here, of course, is how did he die? I guess someone could have killed him, or perhaps he could have died from alcohol consumption, like falling and hitting his head. For this theory to be true, Brian would have had to die in a way which is unlikely. Then the people in the bar would have had to enter into a conspiracy to get rid of the body. This is also unlikely. Also, there is no evidence in the bar suggesting that a crime was committed there. No evidence of homicide. Nothing to indicate Brian died there. Moving to theory number 4. Brian died in the bar like I discussed in theory number 3, and his body is still there. Not surprisingly, the police have thought of this. They searched every inch of the bar. Moving to theory number 5. Brian somehow made it out of the bar undetected and started a new life. His mother had died 3 weeks before. He was facing another transition with the idea of proposing to his girlfriend in a few days. He just decided he wanted something different. He had talked to people before about how if he wasn't going to be a physician, he wanted to live on a tropical island and play music. The problem here, of course, is that it's very hard to just disappear. All he would have had with him would be those items like his phone and his wallet. He left behind all of his personal possessions, his car. It's just hard to imagine. Every day that he's out there is another day somebody could detect him. He's been missing for quite some time, so there have been many opportunities for somebody to spot him. He would almost have to be living in another country for this theory to be correct. Now moving to the last theory, theory number 6. Depressed from his mother's recent death, tired from a lot of studying, and under the influence of alcohol, Brian decided to sneak away from the bar and somehow bring an end to his own life. This theory does not have a large number of assumptions. It is simple for the most part. Brian would be the only person involved. There was a reason for him to have low mood. He didn't tell anybody or even hint at his plan because he knew people would try to stop him, and he made sure he carried out his plan in a way where his body would never be found. So considering all of these theories, which improbable theory is the most probable explanation? I would say theory number 2. Assailants randomly targeted him. After all, he was in a high-crime area. In second place would be theory number 6. Brian brought an end to his own life. None of the theories are satisfying, but as I mentioned, one has to be true unless we go to something like alien abduction, which of course may sound ridiculous, but we know that aliens seem to have an unusually high interest in human physiology. Therefore, a med student might be a good addition to their crew. It could be they offered Brian a job. That's one way to get rid of those student loans. The case of Brian Shaffer is one of the most incredible missing person cases ever. I think it actually causes one to look at other notorious, mysterious disappearances in a new way. Those cases actually have a lot of evidence available compared to the case of Brian Shaffer. For example, looking at the case of Lars Matank. This is a man who ran away from an airport, never to be seen again. When comparing that case to the case of Brian Shaffer, at least we can see Lars Matank running away on video, and we know of odd behavior prior to his disappearance. Similar comparisons can be drawn with the cases of Emma Filipoff, Jennifer Kesse, Maura Murray, and Carly Gousset. Those cases seem unsolvable until comparing them to Brian Shaffer's case. The disappearance of Brian Shaffer is a situation that epitomizes the expression vanishing into thin air. Those are my thoughts on the case of Brian Shaffer. Please put any opinions and thoughts in the comment section. They always generate an interesting dialogue. As always, I hope you found my analysis of this topic to be interesting. Thanks for watching.